The wind howled through the broken spires of Zelor Prime, a once mighty capital now buried under the dust of centuries. In the dim glow of its twin suns, Varn of the Ural stepped over crumbled statues and cracked stone, following the blinking signal from his scanner. He was young by Ural standards, just 82 solar cycles, but already famous for chasing forgotten things across ruined worlds. He wasn't looking for treasure or technology this time. He was chasing a pattern. Something strange. Something that didn't make sense. For the last 4 years, Varn had uncovered whispers buried in the wreckage of collapsed civilizations. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. Phrases written in dead languages, etched on stone, hidden in data crystals, or buried deep in vaults left behind by races long gone. But then he began to notice something terrifying. Every extinct race he studied, no matter how different their language or age, left behind one final warning: avoid Earth. They are not what they seem. They guard a greater nightmare. And now, deep within the last archive of the fallen Zelorians, he was about to find another piece of that puzzle. The door to the underground chamber opened with a grinding moan. Dust filled the air like a living thing, dancing in the beam of his helmet light. Behind him, his assistant drone hovered silently, scanning the walls for readable data. The walls were covered with murals, ancient and fading, but one symbol repeated again and again, a circle of blue with a dark center. Varn had seen it before. It was Earth, a planet ignored by the modern galaxy, marked as abandoned, dangerous, and quarantined in the official records. But no one ever said why. No one ever asked. It was treated like a myth, a cautionary tale for explorers. Don't go near Earth. Don't disturb its silence. Let it sleep. Varn didn't believe in ghost stories, but he believed in patterns. And this pattern was real. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. On it rested a black cube, smooth and humming faintly, as if still alive after all this time. Carefully, Varn activated his scanner and linked with the cube. A voice echoed in his ears, old and trembling, translated into his native tongue by the device. To those who find this, we tried to warn you. They were not the threat. They were the barrier. The humans were the last hope. We failed. You must not. The cube showed images, flashes of tall cities burning, ships crumbling in space, stars vanishing into sudden darkness. And always at the center of the chaos, the image of Earth, untouched, watching, silent. His heart pounded in his chest. It was the same message again. Different language, different people, same fear. He returned to his ship with the cube, his thoughts heavy. Back on the orbiting station of Durrell Outpost, he presented his findings to the Galactic Scholars Council. They listened, but they were not impressed. One of them, a tall Shireen with golden skin, spoke sharply. You're chasing shadows, Varn. These are myths. Dead civilizations leave behind all kinds of warnings. It doesn't mean anything. Another added, Earth is a dead rock. We've sent probes. Nothing moves there. It's not a danger, it's a graveyard. But Varn couldn't let it go. Not when the same message was repeated by races separated by space and thousands of years. It was too perfect to be random. And the idea that humanity, once believed to be weak and warlike, had somehow been responsible for guarding the galaxy from something worse, that idea refused to leave his mind. He began collecting evidence secretly, from forbidden data caches, black market fragments, and old scout reports buried in forgotten files. The pieces were scattered, but they all pointed in one direction. Earth wasn't just abandoned, it was sealed. No one alive knew what the humans had done before they vanished, but their final act had something to do with the thing they had kept hidden. Something even the bravest races hadn't dared to face alone. Some reports described strange energy readings coming from beneath Earth's surface, constant and unchanging for centuries. Others told of ships going missing near Earth's orbit, never to return, with no explanation. One report simply ended with a line written in shaking text. The lock is still there. Pray it never opens. Varn's obsession grew. He knew the Council would never approve a mission to Earth. Too many rules. Too much fear, so he decided to go alone. He quietly prepared his ship, the Whispering Flame, and invited 3 allies he could trust. Lyra, a skilled tech expert who could open anything. Dren, a quiet historian who had memorized hundreds of dead languages. And Vex, a retired warbot with no emotion but perfect loyalty. They were curious, not convinced, but they followed him because they trusted him. He told them just enough to keep them on board. I think Earth is hiding something important, and I think it's time we find out what. As the Whispering Flame left the edge of known space, Varn stared out at the stars and wondered what he would find. He wasn't sure what scared him more, that the cube's warnings were wrong, or that they were true. If Earth was just another ruined world, he would accept it. But if it was something else, something far worse, then they were heading straight toward the heart of a forgotten nightmare. And maybe, just maybe, it was starting to wake up again. The journey to Earth was not just a flight across the stars. It was a step into something forbidden, something buried by fear and time. Varn sat in the command chair of the Whispering Flame, watching the endless black stretch before him while his crew worked quietly around him. None of them spoke much after they left the border of known space. It was not just the silence of space that surrounded them. It was the weight of the unknown. Lyra sat by the controls, her fingers moving over glowing panels, her eyes sharp and alert. She had always been curious about lost tech and forbidden systems, but this mission was different. She had read the ancient warnings too, the strange messages that called Earth a lock, not a planet. She didn't say it out loud, but Varn knew she was uneasy. Dren, the historian, spent most of his time going through the old records they had collected, maps, translations, symbols, and fragments from long-dead species. He was calm on the surface, but sometimes Varn saw the way his eyes lingered on the same symbol, the one all the dead races had drawn, the blue circle with a black center. That symbol was the reason they were out here, heading toward a world no one had visited in generations. And then there was Vex, the warbot who didn't sleep or eat or worry. Vex was silent as always, standing in the corner like a stone statue. But even Vex had raised its head when the warning cube had spoken back on Zilor Prime. It had said the humans were the last hope, and that they guarded a nightmare greater than war itself. Varn had expected resistance from the Galactic Council, but not complete dismissal. They had laughed when he showed them the cube, even though the message matched reports from over 50 lost civilizations. They refused to believe there could be something on Earth worth fearing. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing, their arrogance. Varn had tried to warn them, but now he had to act alone. Not for glory, not for power, but to find the truth before someone else triggered something they didn't understand. The ship passed the edge of the dead zone after 4 days of hyperspace travel. As soon as they crossed into the restricted area around Earth, the stars seemed dimmer, as if space itself held its breath. Systems flickered for a moment. Navigation froze, lights blinked, and the engines gave a low groan like a living creature afraid to continue. Lyra adjusted controls quickly, stabilizing the ship, but her face had turned pale. "Something's interfering," she whispered. "Not natural. It's like the space here is old, tired." Outside the windows, there was nothing but empty black, but Varn could feel something else, like a pressure behind his eyes, a weight in the chest. Dren looked up from his table and said, almost too softly to hear, one of the old texts said space bends near Earth, not physically, emotionally, like the universe avoids it. Varn said nothing, but the unease was spreading. The Whispering Flame continued forward, and soon Earth appeared before them, not as a shining blue gem, but as a dull sphere wrapped in gray clouds and broken orbiting debris. It was silent, lifeless, and yet the scanner showed strange pulses of energy deep beneath the crust, too regular to be natural, too hidden to be an accident. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "That's not weather. That's something else. Something is still alive down there. Not people, but systems. The landing was rough, not because of the terrain, but because the ship didn't want to land. Autopilot rejected the surface repeatedly until Varn overrode it manually. They landed on what was once North America, though the surface had changed so much it barely matched any old maps. Ruins stretched far into the horizon, metal bones of cities long dead, tangled in vines and silence. They stepped out wearing breath masks, though the air was oddly still breathable, as if the planet refused to rot completely. It was Dren who found the first sign of something strange. In the ruins of what was once called New York, under the remains of a collapsed tower, they discovered a sealed vault door, metal too thick for time to eat, marked. Technology she knew. It was something else, something older. Vex stepped forward and placed its hand on the surface, and for a moment, the vault responded, not with force, but with sound. A low hum filled the air, and from somewhere deep below, a voice whispered through their comms in 1,000 overlapping languages. The seal weakens. The barrier is gone. The guardians are dust. The prisoner watches. Varn staggered back. The voice had not come from a speaker or machine. It had come from the ground, from the planet itself. Earth was speaking. They returned to the ship, shaken but more curious than ever. The deeper they searched the ruins, the more evidence they found. Empty homes, untouched by decay. Machines frozen mid-motion, cities that looked like people had just vanished. No bones, no bodies, just silence. It was as if humanity had walked away in perfect order. But why? And where did they go? Dren found fragments of a journal carved into the wall of an underground bunker. The words were Old English, but readable. We are the last. The vault must remain shut. If the stars ever forget us, the lock will fail. We guard the nightmare. We must never be remembered. Varn felt the meaning settle into his bones. The humans didn't die. They chose to disappear. Not because they were defeated, but because they were protecting something too dangerous to be known. And now, with no one left to guard the lock, the thing inside the vault was starting to stir. That night, while the others slept, Varn sat alone in the control room, watching Earth's surface below. A strange pattern had begun to show in the readings. Pulses from the vault, timed like a heartbeat. Something was waking up, something that had waited for a very long time. He didn't know what it was, only that every extinct race had feared it, and humanity had sacrificed everything to keep it hidden. He remembered the final line of the Zelorian cube. You must not fail as we did. And for the first time, he realized this mission was no longer about discovery. It was about survival. They were not just visitors anymore. They were witnesses, and whatever had been sealed beneath Earth, it knew they had come. As the whispering flame hovered silently above Earth's surface, Varn stared out through the main window, his eyes fixed on the planet that was once the cradle of humanity and now stood like a forgotten tomb beneath a curtain of clouds. The ship had crossed half a galaxy to get here, guided by ancient warnings and whispered myths, and yet no amount of preparation had made them ready for what they now saw. A world not dead, but paused, like it was waiting for something to happen. The clouds below were thick and unmoving, their shapes frozen as if even the weather had stopped out of fear. Sensors picked up no movement, no life, and no energy readings matching any known civilization. And yet, beneath that silence, there was something pulsing, faint signals, distant patterns, too clean to be random and too slow to be natural. Lyra zoomed in on the data, her voice low as she said, "Something is still operating down there. Something old, very old." Vex, the warbot, didn't move, but its head shifted slightly as if listening to something outside the ship. Dren sat hunched over his console, trying to decode the latest message they had received, the one that didn't come from any device, but echoed through space itself. "The sky has opened again. You are not welcome." No one said anything after that. With the surface too unstable for autopilot, Varn took manual control and began the descent. The ship moved slowly, pushing through thick clouds that gave off strange electric flashes, not like lightning, but more like neural pulses. As they broke through, Earth revealed itself like a forgotten statue in fog. Vast landscapes untouched for centuries, cities swallowed by vines and dust, towers bent under their own weight, and roads cracked open by time. But what made the crew uneasy was the order in the chaos. Buildings weren't destroyed by war or collapse. They looked as if they had been abandoned carefully, left behind in perfect lines, like everyone had packed up and left at the same time. The crew landed in what once had been a massive city, now overrun with silence and overgrowth, and stepped onto the surface in full gear. The air was breathable, but it carried an eerie chill, even though the temperature read as normal. Every step echoed like thunder in the empty streets. Old vehicles sat where they had stopped, windows still intact, some lights still faintly glowing like ghosts refusing to fade. Dren knelt by a car and touched the dashboard. "Still warm," he whispered, though that should have been impossible. Lyra opened a street terminal, and to her surprise, it powered on. But the interface was alien, even though it had been built by humans. A single phrase kept repeating on every screen they found: "Do not wake the lock." The deeper they went into the city, the more disturbing the patterns became. Cameras were still turning to follow them, though no one had activated them. Public service bots moved in the distance, performing tasks with no masters left to command them. Sweeping dust, watering dead plants, straightening fallen benches. It was as if the world didn't realize humanity was gone. In the heart of the city, they discovered a monument unlike anything in the ancient archives. A black obelisk rising from the ground, smooth and silent, covered in 1,000 tiny symbols that glowed softly in the dark. When Varn touched it, a voice rang out, not from the obelisk, but from the earth itself. "You have come to the prison." The key was never meant to return. The ground trembled slightly, and Lyra pulled Varn away. "This place is not what we thought," she said, fear clear in her voice. "It's not ruins. It's a machine." The realization hit all of them at once. Earth hadn't been abandoned, it had been repurposed. Humanity had turned their homeworld into something else entirely. But for what? Or worse, for who? Dren uncovered the answer in a sealed chamber below the monument, a place guarded by coded locks and walls thicker than a starship's hull. Inside, preserved in perfect condition, was a control room filled with strange organic technology, part machine, part flesh. Screens lit up as they entered, displaying faces of long-dead humans, speaking in broken fragments. "If you are seeing this, we failed. The creature lives. Earth is the last barrier." Then the feed cut to static, and a final sentence flashed on screen. "We became the key to keep it asleep." Varn backed away, suddenly understanding the horrifying truth. The humans hadn't just disappeared. They had sacrificed themselves, merged with the system, given their minds and bodies to fuel the lock, to keep something monstrous from waking up. Earth wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage, and the thing inside it was still alive. Suddenly, the power surged through the room, and every light turned red. Vex drew its weapon, reacting faster than anyone, as the floor beneath them rumbled. Lyra shouted over the noise, "Something's rising." Outside the chamber, the city had begun to shift. Buildings rotated, walls moved, streets folded inward. It wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The entire city was reconfiguring itself, responding to their presence. From the center of the city, a massive structure emerged, rising from underground like a black tower, pulsing with red veins of light. It looked alive. Dren stared in horror and said, "The system thinks we're the threat. It's preparing to wake the nightmare." Alarms began to sound in a language none of them understood, but the message was clear: leave now or be consumed. Varn knew they couldn't leave yet. If they ran, the next explorers might trigger something worse. They had to understand what was locked beneath this planet before it was too late. The ship could escape, but knowledge was the only true weapon they had. He gave the order to go deeper, into the heart of the city, where the signals were strongest, and where, perhaps, they would find the truth that billions had died to hide. As they moved closer to the tower, the pressure in the air increased. It felt like something was watching, not with eyes, but with thought. Dren began to hear voices in his mind, whispers that spoke in forgotten languages. Lyra's hands shook as she held her scanner, the device showing energy readings far beyond what was considered possible. Vex, who had no mind to hear or fear, kept scanning for threats, but even it paused once as if sensing something unnatural. Varn pushed forward, each step heavier than the last, until they reached the base of the tower. The door opened silently, waiting for them, glowing with the same strange light. Behind it, the final secret of Earth waited, the truth no one was supposed to find. As they crossed the threshold, a voice whispered one last warning, this time in perfect galactic standard. Turn back. This was not meant for your kind. But it was too late. They had arrived at the blue planet, and a lock had already begun to break. Beneath the dying sun of the planet Savora, where nothing but ashes and shadows remained, there stood a mountain with no name, untouched by war, time, or the disasters that had erased every city around it. Inside that mountain, hidden deep below layers of reinforced stone and ancient machinery, was the vault, an object of legend that every empire had searched for, but none had returned from. Stories told of unimaginable power, of a source older than the galaxy itself, something left behind by the first builders of the stars. And guarding that vault were not soldiers or machines, but beings whose names were long forgotten, whose purpose was singular and eternal, to stop any intruder, no matter who they were or what they wanted. Captain Rylos had heard the warnings but didn't believe in ghosts or myths. He believed in proof, in treasure, in technology that could change the fate of his dying colony, and if the vault held even a fragment of what the old codes described, then it was worth the risk. His team of 6, elite explorers and hardened veterans, landed near the base of the mountain just as the last storm cleared, stepping out into a world where even the wind seemed afraid to blow. As they approached the stone entrance half buried under rubble, their scanners failed one by one, as if the mountain was swallowing their signals whole. With brute force and old-fashioned tools, they pried open the sealed doorway and entered a tunnel lit by a strange blue glow that came from no source they could identify. The walls were smooth, warm to the touch, and hummed with a rhythm that resembled a heartbeat. Deeper they went, layer by layer, corridor by corridor, where strange statues watched them with blank stone faces, each carved in a different form, some alien, some familiar, some that matched no known species. "Are these the Guardians?" whispered their medic, her voice shaking slightly. No one answered. The silence in the tunnel was alive. As they passed the final arch, the hallway opened into a massive underground chamber, far larger than the mountain should allow, and there it was, the vault. A black sphere floating above the floor, rotating slowly, surrounded by symbols that moved like liquid light, changing shape every second. It didn't glow. It drank light, bending it inwards, and the moment their eyes landed on it, each of them felt something deep inside shift, like their thoughts were no longer private. Rylos stepped forward, and the floor lit beneath him, paths of golden light forming patterns no one could understand. That was when the first Guardian moved. It wasn't a statue anymore. It turned its head, stepped off its pedestal, and without sound or weapon, it faced Rylos. 10 feet tall, made of stone and metal, yet alive somehow, it raised one arm and pointed, not in anger, but as if delivering a message. The vault responded with a low hum, and suddenly they could hear words in their minds, not spoken, but projected. "You were not chosen. Turn back." But they didn't. Rylos ordered everyone to hold position, but his second-in-command raised her weapon. "Stand down," he said, but too late, she fired. The beam hit the Guardian and vanished as if swallowed. The air froze. The Guardian did not attack. It simply closed its eyes, and every member of the team dropped to their knees, screaming in silence, their minds assaulted by visions of civilizations rising and falling, of stars consumed by darkness, of vaults on other worlds cracking open and releasing horrors that couldn't be described. Then, just as quickly, it stopped. The team gasped for breath, some sobbing, some barely conscious, and the Guardian returned to its pedestal, unmoving once more. But something had changed. The vault's rotation increased. The floor beneath them began to sink, lowering them into a second chamber, colder, darker, and far more dangerous. This one had no guardians, only rows of black mirrors that reflected not their bodies but their thoughts. Each mirror showed different fears, memories, regrets. The pilot saw the ship he lost. The engineer saw her daughter's face before leaving. Rylos saw a world drowning in fire, and behind that fire, a door opening. They pushed forward, each step harder, each breath heavier, until they reached the vault's true core, a final door sealed by 6 hand-shaped markings. Without hesitation, Rylos placed his hand on one. The others followed. As soon as all 6 marks were touched, the door opened, not with noise, but with light so bright it erased shadows and memory. And standing there, in the center of the final room, was a being unlike anything they had seen. A guardian, but different. It wore armor made of light, eyes like stars, and a voice that echoed inside their bones. "You seek what you do not understand," it said. "Power is not given. It is paid for." Rylos stepped forward and asked what the vault really was. The Guardian raised one arm and showed them the galaxy, not as it is, but as it once was. Worlds blooming with life, then silenced. Creatures too powerful to control, born from ambition and science gone too far. The vault was not a treasure. It was a seal, a container holding what could not be killed, only locked away. The builders of the galaxy had placed their final hope in it, knowing it could never be opened without consequence. "You are the last test," the Guardian said. "Will you leave, or will you break the seal?" The room dimmed. The team looked at each other. Some wanted to leave, shaken and terrified. But Rylos saw his colony dying, his people starving, and he believed he could use the vault's power for good. He stepped toward it. The Guardian didn't stop him. It watched, silent and still. And when he touched the vault, everything went white. When the light faded, Rylos was alone. The chamber was empty. The Guardians were gone. The vault hovered quietly, unchanged. But something in him felt cold, hollow. He tried to call his team. No answer. Tried to leave. The door was gone. Only a voice remained. "You chose. Now you guard." And as the centuries passed, legends of the vault returned. Travelers who approached the mountain vanished. Signals from the region were never heard again. And some say that inside the vault, a new guardian watches silently, made of flesh and regret, waiting for the next fool to arrive. The vault remained closed, but one day someone would open it again. In a far-off corner of the galaxy, beyond the reach of known maps and forgotten by star charts, a derelict probe drifted silently through space, sending out a weak, looping signal. The message was ancient, cracked with time, but one part remained disturbingly clear in every translation. "Do not approach Earth. They guard a greater nightmare." For centuries, the signal was ignored or dismissed as the ravings of extinct civilizations, just another ghost of the past whispering nonsense. But when the Alari Union's explorers found 3 other probes in different systems repeating the exact same warning, each from a separate extinct species, the mystery became too large to ignore. Captain Thelos of the science vessel Miraxis was assigned the mission to investigate. Confident in his crew's knowledge and technology, and skeptical of old legends, he led the expedition to the small blue planet called Earth, which had long been hidden behind a dense distortion field, a type of energy that shouldn't have existed in a dead solar system. As they pierced the field and entered orbit, the ship's systems began acting strangely. Sensors returned gibberish, AI translators stuttered, and crew members complained of hearing voices when alone. Earth appeared calm, a planet full of water and green land, untouched by cities or machines. No human presence was detected, no signals or satellites, just silence. But that silence felt wrong, as if the planet was holding its breath. Ignoring the uneasy feeling growing among the crew, Captain Thelos ordered a descent to the surface. Their shuttle landed near an ancient ruin, half buried under vines and earth, shaped like a massive stone ring covered in symbols that hurt to look at. It pulsed with a low vibration, not mechanical, but living. As they moved closer, the ship's historian gasped and recognized the carvings. Identical symbols have been found on ruins of 3 dead worlds, all civilizations that vanish without a trace after contacting Earth. "It's the same," she whispered. "They all came here and never returned." Thelos dismissed her fears, determined to uncover the truth. As they entered the ring, time seemed to shift. Seconds stretched, light dimmed, and their comms went quiet. Inside the ruin, they found a chamber filled with strange containers, each sealed and marked with ancient warnings. One of the scientists, driven by curiosity, opened one. Inside was a human, but not alive. The body was perfectly preserved, its eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream, as if caught in the final moment of terror. Then the room changed. The walls bled black mist, and the air grew heavier, like they had awakened something old and watching. One by one, the crew began seeing things that weren't there, visions of their own deaths, of being hunted by something unseen. Some collapsed, whispering nonsense about the voices under the ground and the door that should never open. Captain Thelos tried to maintain order, but the fear spread like poison. The historian found an old tablet, partially translated, which spoke of an ancient war, not between humans and aliens, but between humans and something else that they had once tried to destroy but failed. Whatever it was imprisoned deep within Earth, and the humans of old became its eternal jailers. The nightmare wasn't the humans, it was what they were keeping buried. And now, with Earth long abandoned, the seals were growing weak. The last warning on the tablet was simple. If the humans vanish, so does the last defense. But it was already too late. The ruin began to shake, the ground splitting as an enormous structure rose from beneath, a black obelisk covered in glowing red cracks, humming with unnatural power. The crew rushed back to the shuttle, but it wouldn't start. Their pilot was missing, and the controls were frozen, coated in a thin layer of frost that hadn't been there seconds before. Then the sky turned dark, not with clouds, but with shadows that moved against the stars. From the cracks of the obelisk came whispers, not spoken with mouths but pushed directly into their minds, cold and cruel. "You opened the gate," the voice said. "You broke the last silence." One by one, the crew began to scream, clutching their heads as memories not their own flooded their minds. Battles fought in empty space, stars that blinked out, the end of time washed by beings who could not die. Captain Thelos, barely standing, looked up as a shape began to rise above the obelisk. Formless, vast, with eyes like burning voids, something that did not belong in any universe. It wasn't alive. It wasn't dead. It was the greater nightmare. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the face of the preserved human in the chamber, now moving, its mouth whispering, "You should not have come." When he awoke, he was alone. The ruin was gone. The shuttle was covered in dust as if abandoned for centuries. There was no sign of his crew, no bodies, no records, only a new message carved into the hull. "We guard it still, but you weakened the lock." Somehow, Thelos escaped. Somehow, he returned to his ship, or at least he believed he did. The AI didn't recognize him. The galaxy's records listed the Meraxes as lost 312 years ago, and no one believed his story. The mission logs were corrupted. He was branded insane, a relic from a ghost ship. But in the quiet hours of the night, across distant worlds, The same warning began appearing in forgotten stations, carved into walls, whispered by dying machines. Do not approach Earth. They guard a greater nightmare. And now, others have started listening.